And away we go. It's another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Editor's Show. My name is Pete Sweeney. I'm the editor-in-chief of arrowheadpride.com, joined once again by my esteemed deputy editor, John Dixon. John, now that we've been live streaming and trying to lean into some more video, I got to say we kind of look alike today. We kind of got the same outfit in a way going on.
Yeah,
here.
almost. Yeah. This is an old shirt. Can you tell how frayed the collar is? And but it's laundry day. What can I say?
Yeah, this is one of my more comfortable sweatshirts. I got this green sweatshirt on. I got my trusty Kelly's Westport Inn hat ready to go for the editor's show. So
nice.
We are cooking here. The Chiefs are now 1-1, which is better news than last week. Nobody expected the Chiefs to lose last week, and fortunately they did, but they were able to rebound in Jacksonville, a 17-9 win. I liked these two offenses going into the game. It was anything but an offensive showcase. Ended up being the defense shining for the Chiefs once again. We'll get into all that as we go here. We will review, as we usually do, Andy Reid's Monday morning press conference, taking some of the quotes that we thought were most important and discussing them here. We'll take a quick break. We'll get into our world-famous Marinated takeaways, and then we'll go over some snap counts and check out the opening odds for the Chiefs and the Bears in our final segment. But, John, as we do every week, if you leave a review on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network on Apple iTunes, we'll read it on the show. And this one is from JB the Juice Man. New season, new 5-star review. Yo, Pete, can you pass the live stream times and where to watch? I'm still loving the shows, and Arrowhead Pride is still a staple to my weekly schedule. Keep up the great work all. That is a Steve Serta question. Steve, do you have your mic on, or do you have it available? Can you jump in to answer what he is asking quickly? Is there an official schedule anywhere that we can point people to?
Well, as far as the Arrowhead Pride film room goes, I believe they are going live on Tuesday evenings, but they might be asking about our Friday live streams too that we're doing with the Arrowhead Pride Report. That is every Friday at 9 a.m. sharp. Me and Pete will be doing those all throughout the regular season. And then Chiefs Coast to Coast is also live every Wednesday night at 6 p.m.
So those are all our live streams. Pulling the curtain back a little bit, we were supposed to be recording this at 1:30, but I was 18 minutes late for a variety of reasons. So thank you to the patience of both Steve and John as we record the Arrowhead Pride Editor's Show. I do want to tell you very quickly that we have a new premium newsletter that we're doing. John's involved, so was Jared Sapp and Rocky Magana, and friends, really. We're inviting people each week to help us with the preview of the game. So already Jay Binkley has helped us, JP Acosta from SB Nation. We'll have someone else on this week. We encourage you to check it out. You can get a 7-day trial right now, top of arrowheadpride.com. Again, nothing's changing at arrowheadpride.com. This is for those of you who want a little bit more content delivered right to your inbox. We'll be sending you newsletters 2 to 3 times a week during the regular season. Regularly during the off season, there is a weekly, or I should say a monthly plan, and there's also an annual plan. So if you're interested in that, check it out, arrowheadpride.com. You can click on the link at the top. John, I know you got something to say. What's up?
Oh no, I was just listening. I have nothing this time. I was just listening to what you had to say.
I feel like I have a good read for you. I'm looking down at you in that box. I thought you were itching to get something off your mind.
No, right, usually if I'm trying to get your attention, you don't notice it. So apparently we've got this all backwards.
Like you got to wave at me.
Yeah.
All right,
Pete.
All right, let's get into the Andy Reid press conference from Monday. Andy Reid joins the local media members for a Zoom call every Monday. You can get the full press conference, usually about 10 to 15 minutes, John, on from the podium right here on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. But let's go over the main items that I thought held a little bit more weight. Here was head coach Andy Reid first on the offensive problems of this team.
Well, I think us not making the mistakes on our side. I mean, you had 12 penalties, you had 3 turnovers. I mean, you can't do that, or 2 turnovers, but you can't do that and normally come out with a win. I mean, So you figure that out, and we straighten it out. We should be okay. But I think as you look at it, the players look at it, and I listen to them talk. Things are there. You look at it on tape, things are there, but we're going backwards instead of forward. And if you look at percentages, even with a 5-yard penalty, percentages of scoring on a drive with a penalty is slim to none. We've been able to do that, probably better than anybody in the league, but you're getting these multiples put together here, and that's it's too much.
Yeah, right now the Chiefs are not doing what I think fans are accustomed to seeing, which is score a lot of points. Right now, looks like the Cowboys are at the top of the league in points scored. The Chiefs right now 18.5 per game, which is very, very small sample size. But you would have thought that the Chiefs, as they usually do on offense, would come out firing. It's been the opposite. And I think the key here from Andy Reid, John, was just them simply saying, look, we like all the other parts of the offense. What is happening with the route running is okay. It seems like Andy Reid's happy with the blocking. He just tends to believe if they can clean up these mistakes that they could get cooking on that side of the ball. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I agree. I think he's making a real good point about the turnovers. You don't win many NFL games if the turnover ratio is 3-1. I mean, you're just you're not going to miss. You're not going to have very many wins when you are down by a couple of turnovers in a game. And he's right about the penalties being a drive killer. But the Chiefs actually got through some. I'm looking for something I wrote yesterday. Let's see. Yes, after they got the turnover on downs, the Chiefs got the ball at the 50-yard line. And this is what I wrote in the recap of the game on arrowheadpride.com. Taking the ball at midfield with just over 4 minutes left in the half, the Chiefs lived through a 7-yard sack of Mahomes, a 5-yard penalty on right tackle Juwan Taylor, a 3rd and 22, and a 4th and 22 in a 50-yard drive, and then ended with a 9-yard touchdown pass to Sky Moore, which was the first time they took the lead in the game with 27 seconds left in the half. Those are a lot of things that to get through in order to score on a 50-yard drive. And we saw that kind of stuff happening routinely. Well, not routinely. Right. There weren't that many drives that came close, but even when they finally got a score, they had to overcome a lot of stuff in the game. So Reid is exactly right about this. You just can't let that stuff pile up because it gets in the way.
Yeah, the Chiefs ended up losing 2 fumbles in this game. They threw an interception. The Jaguars only lost the 1 fumble. So you were -2 in the turnover battle. You managed to win. And I still think the Jaguars are going to be a playoff team. I thought it was a good outing for the defense because I really think the offense is pretty good. When you look at Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram and Calvin Ridley, certainly I really respect Trevor Lawrence. So that was important. But the offense is still looking a little janky there, and they're having to overcome some adversity here to put it together enough to win. I think the big takeaway, and this is marinated, so I'm not going to use it in the next segment, is that, man, when you make mistakes and you have problems that you're seeing on the offensive side of the football, feels a lot better having to correct those mistakes following a win than one that might have cost you the game. And I think that's the difference between these 2 weeks. And that was one of the points I think I made last week, John. It's just like, man, if they just would have pulled out the game, you would have felt way better. And this is what that feels like. The offense didn't look great. It didn't look ready to go on this large Super Bowl run. But at the same time, it just looked like one that, if you fix these problems and the defense keeps playing how it's playing, you're going to feel pretty good about where this season can go and having success in the playoffs and getting back to the Super Bowl. So I certainly feel that about the Chiefs right now. I agree with Andy Reid. So we will see how they make their adjustments next game against the Chicago Bears coming up on Sunday. Let's go back to Andy Reid here. And he was asked about right tackle Juwan Taylor, who had to be briefly benched in this game. You're actually going to hear my voice first. This was my first question to Andy Reid, and then Adam Teicher of ESPN follows it up a little bit later. Here are those 2 questions and the answers from Andy Reid.
You talked a little bit about it yesterday, but after watching the film, how you felt Juwan responded to take out for a brief number of plays and then going back in, and what's giving you the sense that he can get right back on the horse and be okay here?
He's a good football player. He's naturally quick without having to cheat on that thing or get caught on it. And and he's strong, so he doesn't need to do that. And he's a smart kid. I mean, we can fix it. He's been doing this for a number of years, and he works extremely hard at it. But it's, once you've had 3 of them in a row or so, and they don't get called, and you have the same crew coming in, there are a new crew coming in, they're going to have an eye on you. And so you've got to back up. He's got to back up and start over on this and just slow it down. He's plenty quick to take care of that.
And one more Juwan Taylor question. He's been in the league in a few years, but he never had, to my knowledge, a game like he had yesterday. How can you explain that?
Well, you're going to have a lot of eyes on you when you come here, first of all. And the week before, on the Thursday game, it was publicized and scrutinized. And so now all of a sudden you put the officials on red alert, and rightly so. It wasn't like they were off on the calls that they had on this week. So, and it was the same crew that worked training camp. They know, they could see it there, and they saw it firsthand here. So it's they were going to call it. Juwan was aware of that. I mean, he knows, and he tried to tame it down a little bit, but as the game went on, it got him there. So,
John, I got a grander point for the next segment as far as the marination goes when it comes to Taylor. So I'll turn this to you. What's your reaction to maybe some of the answers from Andy Reid on Taylor there?
I think there are some questions here that we don't really have answers for. And one of them is, how much of what happened yesterday was because the officials on their own were watching Taylor more closely as a result of what happened on Thursday Night Football, national audience, Chris Collinsworth going crazy over where he was lining up and the quick starts, etc. And then, the league having a meeting about it and sending a memo to the officials. Did that happen? Or was it the case that Jacksonville went into their meeting with the officials before the game yesterday and said, look, we know what Juwan Taylor does because he used to do it for us, and you're going to have to watch him very carefully. So was it either of those things or some combination of them, or was it just random chance? I think that's what we don't really know here. And Andy made it sound like almost as if it was all of those things, and even mentioned that the same officiating crew had been at training camp, so they would have seen him then. I hadn't even thought about that possibility before Andy spoke today. So we don't really know exactly how this all came together, but I certainly believe that it'll calm down after a while. I don't think this is going to be a problem for the whole season. I think that the officials are it's going to adjust going both directions. I think the officials will get off it a little bit now that we've put more time between now and the Thursday night game that opened the season, whenever that happens. Mm-hmm. And I think that he will get better at not getting called on it. So I think it's going to go away, but it was bad. It was bad.
Yeah, I think what I would say was probably all the above and all the things that you're mentioning. I don't think it was a coincidence. Like, that's the only one I would probably rule out, at like where nothing had to do with any. No, I think a lot had to do with the attention on Taylor. I also want to note here, and I saw that there was a big deal about Taylor being benched, and I think anytime you're benching someone of that caliber, someone that is that important, even briefly, it's going to catch the attention. But what I would tell you is that I think receivers and tight ends and running backs even can be benched all the time, but you just don't know it because there is always the rotation. And so when an offensive lineman is benched for a few plays, it's rather noticeable. And I just wonder, and I'm just putting that wonder out there of like how many receivers, if they run the wrong route, get benched. But we don't really know it because the Chiefs have 7 receivers and they're rotating them in and out. And I think that that type of stuff can happen and seem to calm Taylor down. We don't have the data necessarily on this, but it seemed like, what did he have? 1 penalty the rest of the game. And so I thought that was a positive. And this is going to be different, I think, when you go back to Arrowhead and you're not playing your former team and they're not in the head of the official after the national broadcast and things like that. I have another point on Taylor in Marinated Takeaway, so I don't want to talk too much about it. Let's go to Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce took 2 penalties in his return. One unsportsmanlike conduct, 1 unnecessary roughness, and Andy Reid was asked about this and Travis Kelce's temperament in the press conference today. Here were the words of Andy Reid.
Yeah, Travis was fighting Travis. I mean, it was hot. He was getting butched, we call it, where they try to bang you up there one way or another. And, he's trying to get back in the flow. And so he is a perfectionist, this guy. And if he feels he's off a tick, then he's going to try to battle through and get himself in the right mindset to keep fighting through it. So, and he did. You got to give him credit. He battled through the thing. He made some big catches for us. He made it through the game after missing the first one. So I'm sure his leg probably didn't feel 100%, but he's not going to let you know that, and he's going to work through it. And that's what he did.
So those were Andy Reid's words on Travis Kelce. I think the big message here is that Kelce comes out of the game and doesn't have any further injury. Looked okay, did enough. You could tell he wasn't 100%, but I thought the touchdown was big. John, I want to pivot here for a second and go to this breaking news that we're getting as we're recording the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show. This from Adam Schefter. The Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes have restructured his agreement, giving him $210.6 million between 23 and 26, the most money in NFL history over a 4-season span. His compensation for those years now is guaranteed. Also, the Chiefs and Mahomes plan to revisit the agreement in 2026, as told to ESPN by Equity Sports CEO Chris Cabot, who negotiated the deal on behalf of Mahomes. So, in the end, Mahomes gets his restructure, and there's nobody I'd want to be on a call with more than you, John. What do you think? What do you think about this?
210.6 million over 4 years.
That's what it sounds like here.
Yeah.
I don't know
so
how the Chiefs are affording it under the salary cap.
Yeah.
They figured out a way.
Well, it's all guaranteed, so they might have given him some signing bonus, which they would have to do in order to get any kind of camp relief. But they already had like 4 million, as nearly as we can tell. These cap numbers are always, we don't really know. We can only guess based on what information we can get from individual contracts, and the Chiefs are one of the teams that don't give very much information about contracts. So it's always with a big grain of salt that we look at these numbers. But I guess Mike Florio knew what he was talking about. He was just 2 weeks late. I mean, he was saying all off season that the Chiefs were going to do something with Mahomes' contract before the season began, and sure enough, they did. But just a couple weeks in, what do you know?
I will always tell you when I was wrong. You guys have laughed at me about my Justin Ross takes, and he made the roster, and I was completely wrong about that. I had some clown takes when it came to J. Ross, but I had said that Patrick Mahomes will get his restructure. It'll probably happen quietly and amicably, and we're making too big of a deal out of this. And there you go. Now looks to be the highest paid player over the next 4 years, which you think would happen here. As you can see, and I think this is a big message kind of in the scope of Chris Jones, you can see how things can happen when the representatives actually have a really good working relationship with the team, and maybe you can get the compensation that you're seeking. But this, of course, is completely different. And the Chiefs learned a lot, I think, from the 2 decade-long situations over, or I should say 4 decade-long situations over how Green Bay has dealt with their quarterbacks throughout their career and ended it. And they know they have to keep number one happy. And they, I think, realize, okay, we have a generational talent, someone that could potentially be the greatest athlete in the sport's history. We're going to do everything in our power to keep him in the loop on roster moves, to during draft weekend, get his feelings on it. When he is suddenly the 7th or 8th quarterback when it comes to annual salary per year, let's make sure that we take care of him. And it doesn't have to be this big thing where there are things getting leaked out to the media. It can happen behind closed doors. You see that happen today. I think the grand takeaway is the Chiefs are keeping their most important part of their franchise happy, right? It's Andy Reid, probably second to Patrick Mahomes, but it's Patrick Mahomes and then Andy Reid, and you're keeping number one happy here. And I think that's a positive thing for the future of the franchise, and I think it's well done by the Chiefs.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, I didn't expect it for another couple of years. I'll be honest. I disagree with you when you were predicting it over the course of the summer. So hats off to Pete there. I'm sorry if I
Sean,
made it sound.
you get things right, and I get them all wrong all the time. But this is the fun of the editor show here, so that's fine.
Right. Well, we do trade off a little bit here and there, but I thought it would take another couple of years, and I thought that Mahomes didn't care that much, and maybe he doesn't care that much. It's just a question of solving some other problem, for example, camp space, because the usual routine by which the Chiefs get cap space out of Mahomes' contract has to be taken care of in March when they pay that roster bonus. And they have to decide how much of that roster bonus is going to be converted so that they can move money around and gain some cap space out of Mahomes' contract. Well, they got to do that in March, and they did it this year and picked a number, and it turned out apparently not to be quite enough because they thought they'd be able to make a deal with Chris Jones and open some cap space there. And so now it may just be as simple as, all right, we need to open up some more cap space, and the only way we can do this is actually have a restructure of Mahomes' contract. And while we're at it, we'll go ahead and make him the highest paid and stop getting Mike Florio won't be writing articles about it anymore. So, I'm not sure that it's driven by Mahomes' desire to be the highest paid, but anytime you do something with Mahomes, you better make sure he's the highest paid when you come out of it.
Yeah, and the Chiefs have very clearly done that today. I don't think there's a ton more to say about it. I'm sure that we'll be digging into some of the cap numbers. And this also, not only lending credit to the argument of Mike Florio, who I'm sure he's a victory lap man, so I'm sure he'll go and take his victory laps today.
Yes, he is.
But I think this also speaks to just the idea of like that group that often says the cap isn't real, because you're probably looking at the cap today and you're like, how are the Chiefs even handling this? And they got some really good cap specialists there. I think that it's more proper to say it sometimes is real. You're not going to be able to afford every single player that you want because that's how the NFL is designed. But if there are certain things that you want to do, if you have enough planning ahead, then I just feel like you can figure that out. And Kansas City has surrounded themselves with some really smart cap folks. Brett Veach is smart in his own right, but with Chris Shea and Brant Tillis, I mean, it's just a different regime in that sense. Like that's to me is the biggest difference between one regime to another was just the contracts and just the thoughtfulness that this particular regime puts to it that maybe wasn't happening in the last regime. And you're seeing the sustained success because of that. And without that factor and making sure that you're not giving away bad contracts and things like that, you're allowing yourself to, I think, have success and flexibility each and every year. And so for me, I'm happy that they did this. And again, they're keeping number one happy without him really, in a sense, having to publicly ask about it, which, as you've learned from Green Bay, is never the way to go. Because it just it doesn't create a good feel in your organization, even when that quarterback is still there.
Green Bay and Baltimore, the Ravens had that difficulty with Lamar Jackson, clearly unhappy about how long it took for him to get a deal. Yeah, no, I agree. You want to get this done in a way where he doesn't have to go out there and make a big deal out of it publicly. So yeah, a great move for the Chiefs and a great move for Patrick Mahomes. He's got a new house. He'll be able to pay for it.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a major concern with all the endorsement deals that he had. We'll punt our last question or our last thing on Andy Reid. If you want to listen to more from Andy Reid, you can go back to our From the Podium podcast on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. When we come back, we'll get back to the game conversation. It's our world famous Marinated takeaways right here on the Arrowhead Pride Editors Show. Back here on the Arrowhead Pride Editors Show, we had our discussion on Andy Reid's press conference. We had some breaking news, which is rare for the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show as we record on 1:30 on Mondays. But look, you never know right here at arrowheadpride.com. Let's knock out these marinated takeaways so we can make sure we get our articles up on this Patrick Mahomes thing, John. Maybe a little bit of a speed round of marinated takeaways. We'll let you start. What did you take away from yesterday's game?
Well, there was another part of the game that actually ended with the thing I mentioned earlier, where the Chiefs got the ball after making Jacksonville give it up on downs, that I thought was one of the most bizarre sequences of plays I have ever seen in an NFL game. It's hard to look this up. And if it was easier, maybe a little easier, I might have spent some time this morning looking at it. But I sure can't remember too many circumstances where there were 4 fumbles, including 3 turnovers in 5 plays over a minute and 16 seconds. And that's what happened with about 11 minutes left in the second quarter of the game. I mean, that was just a crazy sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get to this on my other point, but I think that maybe both teams didn't come into this game and play as well as they wanted to. I think a lot depends on, which team you're a fan of over what really happened in yesterday's game. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that more in a minute.
Yeah, and there is such passion that comes from a turnover, and it was crazy because in the game and as you're watching it, as turnovers are happening, your team recovers. You suddenly think, oh, we got this under control, and then when your team ends up giving the football away, you start to have that panicky feeling. I think, especially in the side of the Chiefs, who didn't come away with the win last week. Jacksonville was able to win their first game, so I think you were staring the barrel of 0-2 down the barrel of 0-2, and I agree with you. And there's a lot of emotion, I think, that goes into a sequence like that, and it goes to the football is not round, right? So that goes to just the idea of like there is a certain aspect of anything can happen, and I think that was a wild sequence. Certainly, I
wrote that down. I think I wrote that down wrong, actually. That it wasn't 4 fumbles; it was 3 fumbles and an interception. So those of you who are getting ready to get after me on Twitter, I did realize I did it wrong. So, but it was still a crazy sequence.
People think that Chiefs Twitter is wild, and there's I think the craziest Twitter and the most active Twitter is correction Twitter. You make one spelling mistake, you make one fact mistake, you are going to get tweets, and it is not going to take long for these teams to do it. My Marinated takeaways, I'm going to knock out 2 right here. So I teased it in the last segment. It has to do with Juwan Taylor, and my Marinated takeaway when it comes to just Juwan Taylor in general is that like none of our takes matter about this. They gave him 4 years, $60 million. It has to work. Like, it's not like he maybe was benched for a few plays. This idea that all of a sudden, like, they're going to have to pivot from Juwan Taylor. And, and Price was writing an article. I believe we're going to post it later this afternoon on Juwan Taylor, or maybe tomorrow. Just pretty good blocker. It's just getting a little heady when it comes to this whole situation with Thursday night football. And, of course, getting called for false starts. And it seemed like his emotions were running high. It wasn't just false starts yesterday. There was a number of holding calls. It was 2 and 3 plays that ended up getting him benched. And I wondered why we even discuss it just in the scope of he is definitely a starting offensive lineman for the next 2 or 3 years, even if he were to struggle mightily, just because of the commitment and the monetary commitment matters. And I just think about that. And then now this is the other side of it. That being said, and I guess even this Mahomes restructure sort of makes you think about it, right? Like, after watching the game that Chris Jones had, I understand, and I do feel that in the negotiation, he might have made a mistake by demanding a certain number. However, if you're going to demand a certain number and come back and get these incentives and really not agree to what was a pretty nice offer from the Chiefs for 24 and 25 for 27.5 mil, and you're going to say, no, I deserve the 30, then you better look like the way he did. And I just wonder if there may have been in these my 2 combined Marinated takeaways. I know the Chiefs really listen to these and weigh them heavily, but was there some buyer's remorse in committing as much as they did to Taylor and not being able to get to a ridiculous Jones number? Because I understand Jones is 29. I understand the Chiefs have never wanted to pay or I should say overpay a player at that age, but man, he looked like he could not only be a force all year for the Chiefs in this year, but man, it didn't seem like he's going to be slowed down the next year or two just based upon and look, the season's long, but I wonder, as these two situations are happening, someone they did pay a lot of money to, someone they ended up choosing not to commit to, and I think maybe in a sense as a result of what they committed to the other player, just bringing up the swing of things. And I wonder if there was some slight regret as to the way things have certainly panned out early on in this season here.
Well, there certainly wasn't any hint of regret in what Andy Reid said about Juwan Taylor.
No.
He sounded like, yeah, this is just a guy in a weird situation and he made the best of it, but he's a good player. He's a smart player. Well, that's the pantheon of Andy Reid compliments there. He's a smart player and a good football player. I didn't get any sense that the Chiefs feel that way. And I think it's, this is what people do. They see a game where something bad happens to a player and they immediately want to project that over the entire career of the player. And that's especially easy to do when the player is going to make $80 million over that 4-year career with the team. But, this is his second game with the team, and he was playing against a team that knows him well and would know how to take advantage of him more than any other team in the NFL. So I think you have to remember that when you get yourself worked up about what happened with Juwan Taylor on Sunday afternoon. The Jaguars are no slouch. Doug Peterson is no slouch as a coach. And I think they knew exactly what to do to get the most they could out of Juwan Taylor's presence on the other side of the line. I think he's going to end up being fine, and we won't care about this so much.
Yeah.
Over time.
I think it's worth saying too, like when the Chiefs go and get somebody in free agency and pay that much, it's usually someone they believe in like a lot. You saw that with Tyrann Matthew, you saw with Justin Reed, you saw with Juwan Taylor. So even in this situation, it's kind of a weird situation to start the year. It's not, when I bring this up, it's not like I myself think, hey, the Chiefs made a mistake. But I wonder if some of those thoughts are just out there when you see that they weren't able to pay Chris Jones and he had the game he did, and they did pay Juwan Taylor and he had the game that he did. All right, John.
Certainly, they're out there outside of the team.
yeah, right, exactly. All right, John, what's your next marinated takeaway?
Well, I'd like to know what's going on with Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson. After the first game, we thought, oh, Joshua Williams has landed the job, which is what Dave Merritt said they wanted, was for one of these guys to step up and take that slot cornerback job. And lo and behold, in the first game, Josh Williams got all the snaps as the slot cornerback in that game. And then yesterday, Josh Williams got a chunk of them and Jalen Watson got a chunk of them. So are we back to, what's the situation going to be? Is Joshua Williams going to be the main guy in the slot? And sometimes when they're playing a particular team, when the matchup works, Jalen Watson is going to get some of those snaps. That might have been the case yesterday. He had a great game against the Jaguars last year. So maybe that's what it was. All of this uncertainty continues with these two guys. And so, of course, uncertainty is never a bad thing if you're a defensive coordinator and the offense doesn't know what you're going to do. So maybe this is the way the Chiefs really want it. It's just not what they said.
Yeah, Steve Spagnuolo and defensive backs coach Dave Merritt have said that they would like one of these guys to step forward and get the bulk of the snaps. And 2 years later, they're still trying to figure it out as to who they like more. And until they do, they're going to continue with this rotation. I think you saw more of that yesterday. I also thought Jalen Watson quietly had a nice game with that open field tackle early on. And when you end up only winning by a score, those things end up mattering. And also too was the gunner position that he plays when they punted the ball down to what looked like the 2-yard line, I think it was. So Watson, again, didn't play a lot last game, but I think made his presence known in this game. And so we will see what the Chiefs do next game as it continues. This 2-year-long rotation continues to persist. My final marinated takeaway here is more about the upcoming schedule. I just think it's funny how we try to predict the season. And look, I love doing it. It's fun. The night they release the schedule, we get on here with about 4 or 5 contributors, John, and we say, well, what is their record going to look like? But as you start to look at this thing and you start to evaluate what the upcoming schedule looks like, it's like when is the next time the Chiefs are going to play someone over 500? Because they got the Bears next week. They are not. The Jets did not look as good in their second game. When some of that adrenaline runs out after losing your quarterback and you have to face the rest of the season with an already failed quarterback, I feel like it might end up losing some games. They could be under 500. The Minnesota Vikings are under 500. The Denver Broncos are under 500. Those are two teams that you see over the next couple of weeks. The LA Chargers also under 500. The next time the Chiefs, to me, will face a definite team above 500 is week 9. And when you're facing teams like that, you probably should win all the games. So we'll see if the Chiefs do. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games, their next 6 games are opponents that should be under 500 by my estimation before they would then face the Miami Dolphins, presumably at 7-1. Of course, that includes 3 division games, and usually you throw out the record in 3 division games. I'm probably jinxing something there. But I just think it's funny how sometimes we think that the schedule is going to be a certain way, and then suddenly here you are 2 weeks in, 10 days into the NFL season, and everything has already changed.
Well, I think the important phrase in what you just said was by my estimation, because 2 games in, you can't really tell anything. And you're right. We do this every year. We think we know how it's going to play out based on what happened in the previous season, and it never works out that way. There's always teams that did well the previous year that suddenly don't do well, and vice versa. And 2 games in, we can't really tell which teams they are. We might have an idea. A team that's 0-2 right now probably is going to be a sub 500 team by the time they play the Chiefs, but we really don't have a clear idea of which teams are good and which are bad until we're at least 4 games into the season. So I'm going to be a little more cautious about deciding which games are going to be tough for the Chiefs until we get to at least 4 weeks into the season. But you're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're going the right way with what we've seen so far.
I can say with confidence, and maybe I'll regret this when we do our next editor show, John, but the Bears seem to be in shambles.
They do. Yeah.
I think if there's ever a get right opportunity for the Chiefs offense, it's this upcoming week against the Bears. But anyway,
and that's always dangerous to make statements like that, as you know. So
I know. I wonder what their spread. I guess you have the spread on our sites. We'll get to that next. But what is your final Marinated takeaway?
I want to extend a little bit what I said on my first one, that so much depends on your perspective. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi said, you're going to learn, young Luke, that a great deal matters about your point of view. I didn't quote it correctly, but that's the idea here. I'm sure that there are Jacksonville fans today who are saying, our offense just looked terrible. But here in Kansas City, we're talking about how good our defense was. And vice versa. We're saying the offense looked awful, but in Jacksonville, they're saying, oh, man, the defense was terrific yesterday against that great Chiefs offense. So much depends on your point of view about this stuff. But I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about here. We're going to look at statistics. Let me find the right thing. Oh, I changed this somehow. So I'll have to do it from memory. The Chiefs and the Jaguars were both about 30% on 3rd down, but the Chiefs were perfect on 4th down, while the Jaguars were 0-2 on 4th down. And that turned out to be a big point in this game, that the Chiefs were able to convert a couple of 4th downs in this game. One of them on the drive we talked about before that gave them their first touchdown in the game. And then the other thing was that the Chiefs were 2-4 in the red zone, which is not great, but it's passable. And the Jaguars were 0-3 in the red zone. Now, as Chiefs fans, we're going to look at this and say, well, it's because the Chiefs defense was great. Well, yeah, the Chiefs defense made some plays in important moments that kept the Jaguars from scoring in a number of circumstances. But it's also true that there were at least 3 occasions in yesterday's game where Jaguars receivers had their hands on footballs but didn't get their feet in bounds in the end zone. And if any one of those plays had turned out differently, we might be looking at an entirely different game. And that isn't about the defense. That's about the wide receivers and the quarterbacks and paying attention to what they're doing. So much of this depends on perspective. And I'm a little hesitant to say the offense is in real bad shape. As I noted before, there was that 150-yard drive where they got through a whole lot of problems and still managed to put points on the board. And you've got to have a good offense to do that. And I think also that the Jacksonville defense was there to play also. And I think they had something to do with what happened with the Chiefs offense on Sunday.
Yeah, I think Andy Reid agrees with you from what he was saying this morning on that media call. It's just that they're a lot closer than maybe it meets the eye at this point. And good to be 1-1 with that happening. And like I said, I think they'll look to try to continue to improve that as they go into this Bears matchup coming up this weekend. I'd mentioned that we got to get off here to try to get some of this Mahomes stuff up, John. Let's just finish up with the opening spread against the Bears and see what that is and maybe have some commentary about that, and then we'll wrap things up.
Well, you said that the Bears are in a shambles, and that would certainly be indicated by the point spread, which is 13 points as the spreads open on Sunday night. 13 points, that's a lot for a betting spread in today's NFL. And so that suggests that the Bears are in serious trouble, or at least the public believes that the Bears are in serious trouble, and those two things are often the same. So, yeah, they're a mess.
Yeah, they have a good young quarterback in Fields, and I was talking with Steve this morning before we started. They got to be thinking, is this the year that maybe we have a down year, and think about bringing Caleb Williams in, who seems to be the fascination of all teams that are mediocre right now in the NFL. I know the Arizona Cardinals are one of those teams that I think the fan base is eyeing Caleb Williams, but we shall see. It is the Chiefs and the Bears. That's coming at you at 3:25 p.m. Arrowhead time. We'll get you ready this week at arrowheadpride.com. And, of course, here on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network, we have a full list of shows for you to check out. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show. If you like arrowheadpride.com, if you like the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple iTunes. I will be happy to read it right here on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network and the Editor's Show. So, for Steve and for John, my name is Pete Sweeney. Thank you for joining us on another edition of that Arrowhead Pride Editor's Show.